Darkcast Network. Out of the shadows come the best indie podcasts.
Hello, my name is DJ, and I'm the host of the Mythical True Crime Podcast. Join me and the Darkcast Network of indie podcast creators as we delve into the mysterious and the macabre, exploring captivating tales of true crime, legends, and unsolved mysteries from the realms of mythology and reality. Uncover the dark true tales of modern legends with our spoken narratives that blend history, crime, and the supernatural. Just starting Season 3, you can listen to the newest episodes every other week, as well as all my backlog episodes on anywhere you can listen to your podcasts.
Hey everyone, welcome to True Crime California. I'm your host Cindy, and I'm glad you're here. Hey everybody, welcome back to True Crime California. I'm very happy to be here. I hope you've all had a great new year. Yeah, we're going to just get into a new case, but before we do, I just want to say shit's fucked up in America right now. I'm an extremely political person. I try to not get too crazy on here because I already have like weirdos that like stalk me and post like 1-star reviews everywhere they can because people are fucking crazy. And if that's you, go fuck yourself. But I think that it's really important to stand up for what you believe in, even if it puts you at personal risk, especially when that personal risk is a bad review instead of like, you know, your life. So I'm just going to say like, fuck ICE. And that if you are the type of person who thinks that it's okay for us to overthrow a government in another country because the government is corrupt, but then you also think it's okay to shoot a woman in the face as she tries to drive away, you're a piece of shit and you deserve whatever happens to you. Unfortunately, I don't deserve what happens to all of us as a result of your idiocy. So everybody please wake up and knock it the fuck off. Okay, now that that's out of the way, sorry I hit my mic. I'm going to do a case that I actually did a long time ago for my other podcast that has always been really funny to me. It's not funny, it's terrible and it's sad, but the woman is such a fucking idiot that it makes it kind of funny. So we're going to get into that. Again, Happy New Year, despite how unhappy it kind of actually is. I hope everybody is doing the best they can given the circumstances, that everybody is staying safe, and, you know, viva la revolucion. All right, let's get into it. So I'm going to be covering the case of Angelina Rodriguez, otherwise known, at least to me, as the dumbest black widow in California. Which is interesting as her IQ is apparently around 112, so she's actually pretty intelligent, or has the capacity to be. So I'll just say that greed is a hell of a drug. And everything I'm saying will make sense soon, I promise. But first, let's talk about Angelina Rodriguez's young life, which is definitely one of those cases where you feel terrible for her as a child, but you still have to hold the adult accountable for their actions. So anyway, here we go. Angelina Rodriguez was born May 31st, so yet another Gemini murderer. There's so many of them. May 31st, 1968 in Long Island, New York, to parents whose names I couldn't find, which is fitting when you hear more about her childhood. I also actually can't find her maiden name, which is frustrating, but in the end, I guess it doesn't really matter. Anyway, she was the younger of two sisters and always the more feisty of the two. That being said, her entire life, people referred to her as calm and sweet and easily bullied. She was also apparently deeply religious and wore her heart on her sleeve. When she was only 2 years old, her grandfather, who babysat her and her sister very often, began molesting her. And unfortunately, this continued on through high school and even resulted in a fucking abortion, which is just, I don't even know what to say about that. But for this to be happening basically from the time that you can have any sort of memory, that's got to do something to a person. It's got to do a lot of really fucking bad things to a person. And it did, and it led to Angelina creating multiple personalities as a way of disassociating from the extreme abuse that she was subjected to for her entire young life. Now, Angelina, despite being sweet and easily bullied, did tell her family about the abuse, but nobody did a single thing about it. In fact, this is so crazy. Later on, her sister made some really concerning comments about the abuse, which I'll quote below, just to give you an idea of how fucked up this family was and is, and how Angelina never really stood a chance, despite the fact that she made very bad choices in a very specific way. I think she was kind of doomed from the start. So here's his sister's quote. Quote, "She allowed it to happen. She was always looking to be accepted and looking to be daddy's little girl." She's talking about a girl who was abused from the time that she was 2 years old. And who knows, but maybe this sister was also being abused. I don't know. Here's another quote from this gem of a family member. "The grandfather abused the other girls in the family, but we kind of stopped it when it was supposed to be stopped." Like, when exactly is that kind of abuse supposed to be stopped other than before it ever happens? Like, what is the mentality here? This is fucked up. And this poor little girl, being blamed for it, she wanted it. Bitch, she was 2. The fuck is wrong with you? So that gives you an idea of just how twisted this family is. And they completely normalize this abuse to the point where it's pretty much expected and absolutely considered to be the fault of the victim, even though it started before she could even speak full sentences. So very, very, very fucked up. Now, like I said, nothing good was going to come of this situation. And by the time she was 8 years old, Angelina had already attempted suicide. And she attempted again when she was 16, with the second attempt landing her in the hospital. So there are records of these attempts. It's not just her, creating this narrative later on to make people feel bad for her. This is true. An 8-year-old little girl tried to kill herself because she was being abused by her grandfather, and her family did not care. Now, at age 19, Angelina married and quickly divorced a neighborhood boy named Hector. And from there, she finally got away from her family by joining the Air Force. So I think she probably, married this young neighborhood boy to get away from her family. Like, fuck, I'm old enough. I'm going to get married and move in with him and get the fuck away. And when that didn't really pan out, she joined the Air Force because anything was better than being at home. She moved all the way to Florida to do this. And while training in Colorado, met and fell in love with a man named Tom Fuller. The two married, and at first things were great. They moved to Southern California for Tom's work, and Angelina stayed at home to be a mom. They had a daughter, Autumn, around 1990, and according to Tom, Angelina became even more religious than she already was, which was kind of crazy because she was pretty religious, and then she also became preoccupied with the afterlife, which is a little concerning. Now, the couple had a second daughter, Alicia, in 1992, and unfortunately, Alicia had a lot of health issues, including being born prematurely. This may have either led or contributed to Angelina's sort of preoccupation with, the afterlife and just her general worries, but it's really hard to say. She made sure that the girls were christened, quote, in case anything happened. Now, by this time, I'll just call out that Angelina had already done a few questionable things in her life surrounding lawsuits. Now, at one point, she had sued her former employer, a fast food restaurant, citing sexual harassment. She also sued Target after she, quote, slipped and fell in one of their dressing rooms. So the slip and fall cases are very, very common and usually bullshit. So she was into litigation, we'll say. That was kind of her thing, right? And one day, she and her husband Tom were at a restaurant with their 2 daughters, including the infant Alicia. A waitress saw Alicia sucking on a Gerber pacifier and told the couple to be careful, as some of those pacifiers had been recalled due to the nipple pulling apart from the shield. So to clarify for anybody who doesn't have a kid or hasn't seen a pacifier, or at least an old school pacifiers, they have sort of a flat front area that keeps it from going entirely into the baby's mouth. And there is something like a nipple attached to the shield. And in fact, nowadays, most pacifiers are just one piece, so the shield and the nipple are all together, so there's no way for it to come apart. But back then, and you can still find these today, but back then we were still learning about safety. And in this case, the nipple and the shield were 2 pieces. So, they could come apart with sucking. It's just interesting to have something like that could come apart with pulling when it's literally something that's being pulled on by an infant's mouth. So not super smart. So anyway, the couple left, and that was kind of it for a while with that, after that conversation. So this was sometime, I think, in the summer of 1993 when Alicia was like a little over a year old. And things went on for a little while after that, just fine. Then came September 18th, 1993. This was a day in which Tom was away on business and Angelina was home alone with 3-year-old Autumn and 18-month-old Alicia. 18 months old. I can tell you as a mother, that baby is not a baby. That's a toddler. And that's a whole ass person. They've got a personality. They've got feelings. I mean, they always do, but like they can actually communicate them with you. This is not a tiny infant. Now, at some point during the day on September 18th, police received a frantic call from Angelina saying her infant was in her crib not breathing. When they arrived, Angelina said she found her in the crib already dead with a broken pacifier shield on the ground. It was found that Alicia had choked to death on the nipple part of the pacifier, which, if you ask me, is extremely fucking suspicious. Especially since Alicia had had a lot of health issues, which was a burden for Angelina. And especially because Tom later found out that Angelina had taken out a $50,000 life insurance policy for Alicia without his knowledge or involvement at all. Now, this could have been because Angelina knew that Alicia was in poor health, but let's be real here. I think we can all say we know what happened. And I'm not going to say it out loud because she's never actually been convicted for this, but this is definitely a big part of the story. I think that she murdered her own fucking child. So I guess I did say it out loud. I just had to say that I think that. And then you'll never believe what she did. She sued Gerber. And she won a $750,000 settlement, which in this day and age is like multiple millions of dollars. This woman is absolutely fucking evil. Anyway, shortly after this, as you can imagine, the marriage fell apart entirely, which is fair and common, even without Tom really knowing what happened. I think couples, when they lose a child, it's pretty easy for them to fall apart. And I don't think it's anybody's fault. In this case, I'll say it's Angelina's, but just generally speaking, I think it's very common and you can't really blame anybody. It's just part of the grief. So anyway, after, they break up, Angelina becomes a version of herself that her family had seen before, but not since before she had married Tom. Angelina became a victim of misfortune over and over and over again. She told her family she was pregnant with twins, even though they all knew that she'd had a hysterectomy. When the babies never materialized, of course, she told them that she fell down a flight of stairs and lost them as a result. Which is a really weird set of stories to make up just for no fucking reason. It's just very, very strange. Now, I think it's probably common for people who were victims of such severe abuse in childhood to create fantasies as a way of disconnecting from the reality, of their trauma, which is really, really sad. And if that's all that she did, that would have been fine. But clearly that's not all she did, so fuck her, So anyway, after the divorce, Angelina bought a house in Paso Robles, which is a very rich community in central California, sort of like northern part of Southern California. It's a very rich area with mansions in the hills, and it's not far from the ocean. It's not known for being an ocean community, but it's close. It's kind of close to the mountains, close to the ocean. It's a really, really nice place, great weather, lots of rich people. It's actually not super far from San Luis Obispo, which is where Kristen Smart went missing. So just to sort of give an idea of where she was at this point. So she also moved on romantically, of course. She actually had, I think, one more marriage that didn't last very long. And from there, the single mother of one daughter met yet another man, Francisco Frank Rodriguez. Now that's how we get her last name. Now, before I talk too much about Frank, I want to talk about a friend Angelina made before she met this man. And there's actually a couple of friends that factor into this story, but I just kind of wanted to touch on this one because she's sort of there for the inception of their relationship. This friend, a woman named Betty Haley, actually bought Angelina's Paso Robles home from her when she decided to make yet another life change. Angelina, who her family described as flighty, chose to sell her home, possibly because she didn't have money to support her lifestyle, but I don't know, because she still lived in Paso Robles after she sold her house. So I'm not really sure what the deal is, but she sold it and became friends with Betty. Betty later said that she was always in awe of Angelina, who drove an expensive car and would buy whatever she wanted just on a whim. She also took Betty on a vacation to Mexico and lavished her with gifts. And these ladies just became friends because of the house. Betty later said that while she loved Angelina, she never really trusted her entirely and wouldn't allow her to be alone with her husband, for instance, which is pretty wild. Angelina was very pretty, but she was also obviously pretty shady. And it's interesting that Betty recognized this, but still spent time with this woman, kind of knowing what she was about. Anyway, so Angelina has bought and sold a house in Paso Robles. She married and divorced again. And at this point, she's not really doing anything. She's not working. So she enlists in the National Guard because remember, she had already been in the service. So this was something that she could easily do. And, she decided, I guess this was the next thing she was going to do to make a little money and kind of find something to do with herself, right? So Betty and Angelina met in 1997, and Angelina was single from this point until the year 2000 when she met Frank. The two met in February of 2000 at Angel Camp, a sort of boot camp for wayward youth in the area. Now, Frank was a great guy, but he had quite a journey to this point in his life. He had actually also come from a very chaotic family, just like Angelina, and had sort of been the parent to his 5 younger siblings. He married young, I think it was a high school sweetheart situation, joined the Navy, and became a teacher. Now, sadly, his first marriage ended in divorce, which devastated Frank both emotionally and financially. So from here, looking for love and support, he joined a Pentecostal church and became a counselor for wayward youth. From there, he started working at Angel Camp and briefly dated a woman before meeting Angelina. So I'd say it's pretty clear that Frank was looking, for love and stability, something he had likely been chasing his entire life as he wasn't raised with that whatsoever, and then lost it with his divorce as well. Now, Frank was a devout Christian, obviously, because he joined that church, and refused, even though he really liked Angelina, refused to have sex with her until they married. At one point, Angelina told Betty that she wasn't in love, but that Frank was a good man with a good job and he loved her daughter Autumn, so she felt it was the right thing to do to marry him, which is an interesting take. And we'll see where that goes. So as I said, the two met in February 2000 and were married by April of that same year, with Frank's sister refusing to come to the wedding as she felt it was too soon, which means up to the point of this story, she had never met Angelina. Now, within days of marrying, and I mean within days, the couple moved all the way down to South LA to the city of Montebello, which is actually where my dad was born and raised. And Frank got a job as a teacher while Angelina once again stayed home. Now, the one thing I haven't mentioned until now is that Angelina always said the same thing about her former husbands. They became too possessive of her and too strict with Autumn. It was sort of like her lie each time, or her situation, whatever. They were too possessive, too mean, etc., etc., etc. And meanwhile, besides her saying this, there's no record of it whatsoever. No record with police. Friends never saw it. Family never saw it. It was just basically her way of having an excuse to end a relationship for whatever reason. And that's what Angelina started to say about Frank within a month of marrying him. Within a month. They'd only known each other for 3, and she's already unhappy. Now, despite this, she kept up appearances with Frank, not letting on that anything was wrong, because it probably really wasn't. There probably wasn't actually any problem. And all the while, our girl here is plotting her next payout. Now, because Angelina wasn't working, she had time to go see her friends way up in Paso Robles, even though it was quite a drive from Montebello. And she would go there often to hang out, have drinks, just sort of do whatever she wanted while Frank stayed home and worked and supported the family. By stay home, I mean stayed in Montebello. And around this time, she began complaining to yet another friend, Palmyra Gorham, about Frank and about how unhappy she was in the marriage. In fact, a few times, she joked about killing Frank, saying that since he had a life insurance policy, she should just, quote, get it over with and kill him. Palmyra had asked why she didn't just divorce him like she did all the others, which is funny. And Angelina said she had a life insurance policy on him and wanted the money. And to clarify, Angelina had in fact basically forced Frank to take out a $250,000 life insurance policy just a month or so after they married, promising to do the same herself. At first, Frank protested because he was like, I'm super healthy. I've never had a problem in my life with my health. Like, why do we need to do this? But eventually he relented and took the physical, after which his policy was approved. Now, weirdly, Angelina never showed up for her physical and therefore never completed her end of the bargain. Anyway, back to this conversation with Palmyra and how weird it was. Palmyra's mother, I guess, was present for this particular conversation and told Angelina about a woman who used oleander tea to poison her husband, but ultimately got caught. Now, to be clear, at this time, neither woman was was taking these conversations seriously. They were like just kind of chatting like, oh, I saw this on a true crime show, like whatever. Now, Palmyra, who again lived in Paso Robles, had a neighbor with an aggressive dog, and around this time that they were having these conversations, the dog actually bit Palmyra's son. Palmyra and her then boyfriend were super upset about the lack of response by the police, and even joked with Angelina about taking matters into their own hands by giving the dog antifreeze-soaked hot dogs. Which, by the way, is really fucked up to even joke about, because, like, what the fuck? But anyway, Angelina apparently was confused by this conversation as she didn't realize antifreeze was poisonous, nor did she know that it tasted sweet. So this was a very important conversation for her, as we'll see. We're now in July 2000, and Palmyra and Angelina have been friends for about 10 years at this point, and around this time, they're spending a lot of time together. Also around this time, Palmyra's nephew, who was actually older than she was, got out of prison. And when he got out, he came to stay with Palmyra. My apologies if you hear little feet on the ground. It's my dogs jumping up and down off the bed because they can't leave me alone. Anyway, so this nephew comes to stay with Palmyra, and while he'd known Angelina for many years, it wasn't until he got out of prison that he really started to notice her, I guess we'll say. And Angelina and this man, Mr. Lauren Matthew Moranis, who went by Matt, of course, started a relationship. So now Angelina is cheating on Frank, talking about killing him, and spending a ton of time way up in Paso Robles while he's back home in Montebello. So things are not good, and they're about to get a lot worse. And remember, this is all within like 6 months of meeting, and like a couple of months after getting married. But before we get into where this is inevitably going, let's talk about Angel Camp, where Angelina and Frank first met, just to lay a little background. Now, as I mentioned, the two married and immediately moved to Montebello, where Frank got a job. But there's actually a reason for this beyond just wanting to settle into their new life together. See, Angelina, as we know, is a pathological liar and likes to create drama wherever she goes. As such, she did her thing while working at Angel Camp by accusing a man who worked there of sexual misconduct with a number of the children living at the camp. Now, this included human trafficking, which, that's a big accusation to levy against someone. Now, try as I might, I couldn't figure out why she was singling this man out. But in any case, the man that she was levying these accusations against was Charles Chad Holloway. And as you can imagine, he was not happy about this. And I believe the only person who believed her at this camp, like any of her coworkers, bosses, etc., was Frank. While everyone else was Team Chad and pretty much ended up hating Angelina. So the couple kind of had to get out of there because of her behavior. She certainly dug her own grave, we'll say. So just hold on to that information because it's interesting and it comes back later. Anyway, so now we're in the summer of 2000 and Angelina is in this relationship with this Matt person, cheating on Frank and talking about poisoning him or otherwise killing him. As we move into September and the fall of 2000, it seems that Angelina cannot wait any longer to cash in on the life insurance. So she tells Matt she's going to break part of her dryer in order to kill Frank via a gas leak so that it looks like an accident. And in fact, the gas company was called by Frank around the time that Angelina said this to Matt after he found a leak in the house while home alone. Angelina, of course, was in Paso Robles. When the gas technician came to the house, he put in his report that there did not seem to be any way the leak could have happened accidentally. But because everyone was fine, there wasn't really anything else to say, so he fixed it and kind of went on his merry way. Now, of course, Angelina was not happy about this, and of course, she kept trying. After the gas leak attempt, in early September, Angelina was on the phone with Palmyra, just sort of chatting, when Palmyra heard a loud sound in the background of the call. She asked Angelina what it was, and Angelina said she was making Frank a special milkshake because he liked them when he was sick. Palmyra said, "Oh, is Frank sick?" To which Angelina replied, "Not yet." By this time, Angelina talked about killing Frank so often that Palmyra was actually annoyed by the conversation and really didn't take it seriously, so said something like, "Whatever you do, just do it and don't tell me about it." Sort of brushing it off yeah, I keep hearing this, you're a broken record, whatever, right? Now, as far as Frank being poisoned a bunch of times, it's not 100% clear that was actually happening, so I don't really know what went on with, this milkshake, for instance. But it does seem as though Angelina had been trying to poison him at least a few times, as people said Frank was having stomach issues and looked very thin and sickly. So while there aren't any, medical reports of this happening, like him going to the doctor, throughout the months, he was losing weight. He was generally not feeling as well as he used to. And later on, people sort of mentioned that, although I think it was sort of mild enough that had he not died, people probably wouldn't have ever noticed. So while I can't give any sort of definitive answer as to whether or not she actually poisoned him that time with that shake, what I can tell you is that a few days after that phone call, Frank actually got called to go chaperone kids being transported to Angel Camp on September 5th, 2000. He didn't work there anymore, obviously, he's teaching in Montebello, but he was still sort of involved and jumped at the chance to do something different for the day. Now, when he got back, or maybe about a day later, he started to feel very, very sick. And Angelina was home with him at this time and was, quote, taking care of him, right? So the day after that, so he comes home on the 5th, on the 6th, he's feeling really shitty. Then on September 7th, 2000, Frank was so sick that he asked Angelina to take him to the hospital. So they get to the hospital and he's diagnosed with food poisoning and was sent home with specific instructions to drink lots of fluid and especially Gatorade. So there's her way in right there. Doctor's orders, drink some sweet liquid. So like I said, we all know where this is going and also kind of where it's been. So now he's at home, he's sick, Angelina's taking care of him, feeding him lots of Gatorade, and 2 nights later at 3:19 a.m. on Saturday, September 9th, 911 dispatchers receive a call from Angelina and Frank's home from Angelina saying that she found Frank face down in their bedroom, unresponsive. When police arrived, they found Frank dead in the bedroom with a tiny amount of blood coming out of his nose. Now, other than that, there were no obvious signs of trauma, so it wasn't possible at that point to determine what had happened. Even so, police are kind of doing their job, securing the scene, interviewing everybody, and immediately, while they are still there, Frank's body still on the ground, one of the officers on site felt that Angelina was acting strangely, noting, quote, although it was audible, the crying noise, there was a lack of tears, and as soon as I would talk to her, ask her a question, she would immediately kind of snap out of it and answer the questions real quick. And in my experience, usually someone who just lost their husband, they're very difficult to speak with and communicate to. So already she just she's not even a good actress. Frank was only 41 years old at the time of his murder, and for the next several weeks, there was no official cause of death determined. Which is why, even though that officer thought Angelina was acting weirdly, they didn't really look into it too much, at least not that night, as everybody grieves differently, and again, there was no signs of foul play. However, as time went on, things got really weird. And by things, I mean Angelina's behavior, because she just starts wilding out. Now first, within hours of Frank's death, Angelina called Frank's family and told them the news, with each of them noting her complete lack of emotion while on the phone. So everybody's noticing she's not very upset, not just the police, but Frank's family as well, including members of his family who have never met her. Because again, remember, they met, they got married, he died all within the span of 6 to 8 months. So a lot of these family members have only ever maybe spoken to her on the phone or just know about her, but have never met her. And even these people who don't even know her are like, yo, this seems real fucking weird. She's not at all upset. Something is off. Now from there, after calling his family, her next call, and I mean literally 7 hours after his death, her next call was to her insurance broker, who sold her the life insurance policy. I mean, the body's not even cold yet, and she's trying to collect on it. Now, this broker, Mickey Maricino, also noted a lack of emotion when talking to her, and ultimately told Angelina that they would need not only a death certificate, but they would also have to do their own investigation into the death since it happened within 2 years of her buying the policy. Now, this posed a huge problem for Angelina because the medical examiner could not find a cause of death. And without a cause of death, there would be no death certificate, which is really interesting. And I wonder how that works in general, because there's a ton of families, or there must be a ton of families waiting on a determination letter that may never come. So it's like, did they just never get their insurance money? It seems weird that if they can't figure out the cause of death, you can't move on, you can't get money from life insurance. And I mean, I'm sure part of that is because they're not trying to pay out everybody who murders their spouse. But I also just wonder, as a policy, how many families that screws over who legitimately lost their loved ones. Anyway, so without specific testing, standard blood tests won't find poison. So if nobody's looking for it, they're not going to find it, which to me is very fucking scary to know. Somebody has to suspect it, and that specifically, for you to ever find it. So like I said, when the autopsy came back, they left the cause of death as undetermined. And I don't think Angelina really knew anything about this, about the blood tests and things. She was really just kind of so focused on the murder and getting the money that she didn't do her research first. But I feel like if she was thinking about this, she wouldn't want people to find out that he was poisoned, right? So for her, and I think she was thinking oh, he'll die, I'll get the money. She didn't realize they'd need a death certificate. She didn't realize they wouldn't be able to find a cause of death, whatever. She was sort of just flying by the seat of her pants. But in my opinion, she's fucking lucky that they didn't find that he was poisoned, right? Right? I mean, that makes sense, right? Well, maybe not. At least if you're Angelina, who started spinning out immediately. Now, first, Mickey Maricino said he was getting calls from Angelina multiple times a week, asking if there was anything they could do to hasten the process. She also started calling the police regularly, asking if there was any update on the cause of death. And when both police and Mickey told her it would just take time, she decided to take matters into her own hands because greed over brains, right? It's all about that money. At Frank's funeral, only a couple of weeks after his death, Angelina told his family about how she believed he'd been poisoned by his former co-worker, Chad Holloway, in retaliation for her calling him out for abusing children. She went as far as to mention it could have been either oleander or maybe even antifreeze. So getting very, very specific because she's a fucking genius, right? Now, prior to this, she had tried to tell his family he drank himself to death, which they all knew was a lie because Frank didn't drink, at all. Not even, socially. So she's just very dumb and very fucking careless, which ultimately is a good thing because it gets her caught. Now, this may sound crazy, but even before his funeral, Angelina had already spun this poisoning tale to the actual fucking police. So I'm telling you that she told his family that just a couple of weeks after his death, but before that, she had already told the police this, which is absolutely insane. In an attempt to get that sweet, sweet death certificate, she called investigators and told them she thought Frank was poisoned by that same ex-coworker from the camp. She wasn't quite as forthcoming with the kinds of poison that may have been used, but she did mention a, quote, plant that grows on the freeway, which is so suspicious and so dumb. Now, from the start, police considered her maybe not necessarily a suspect, but they thought that if there ever came a time they needed a suspect, she was probably going to be one of them. So if Frank's death ever became a homicide, she was suspect number one. Now, with this new information straight from the horse's mouth, police really started to think this was, in fact, a murder, and that Angelina was, in fact, the murderer. Because of this, they assigned 2 investigators to the case, and these guys' first order of business was investigating the allegations against Chad, because I don't think at any point they thought it was him, but I think they needed to check him off the list so they could focus back on this dipshit. So the investigators went to Angel Camp and found that despite Angelina's insistence, everybody there still loved and missed Frank, even Chad. Almost immediately, Chad was cleared as a suspect in the case, but funny enough, he still has a big part in the story, which we'll get back to. because at one point police knew, Angelina's up to something. So they decided to tell Angelina that her story had checked out and that Chad was in fact a suspect in Frank's murder. Now, meanwhile, Angelina is continuing to call the insurance agency, telling them she needs money to buy a new house in Paso Robles, and asking them to send proof that she would be paid soon, when in fact the claim wasn't even close to being processed. She's just so fucking impatient and so greedy, which is just so gross. Anyway, police have Angelina believing that her story is going to work and that she's going to pin this on Chad and they're going to get the cause of death and she's going to get the money. They also have her believing that they believe she's just this helpless widow trying to make ends meet and help solve the case of her husband's untimely death. Now, police used this trust to go into her home and sort of look around a bit while trying to get her to tell them again about the plant that may have poisoned Frank. Now, she was trying to be careful and she said she couldn't remember the name, but that it grew on the side of the freeway and had red and white flowers. When police went back into her home just a few days later, it was empty as she'd already moved back to Paso Robles. But in the backyard, they found a large oleander bush. So still, and possibly intentionally, police were moving slowly and Angelina did not like it one bit. So they're starting to gather evidence against her. But I'm sorry, I'm tripping on my words so much. But I think what they realized is that if they moved slowly in the case, she would actually help them more. She would get impatient and give them more information. So while they were definitely like zeroing in on her, I think part of their strategy was just let her come to them. And boy, did it fucking work. Now we're on October 9th. We're in October 2000. And on October 9th, Angelina contacted police again. And this time her story got even wilder. She told police that an anonymous man had just called her to tell her that he had just had a call with Chad Holloway. Now remember, she thinks Chad's a suspect, but even so, this is just fucking dumb. She tells police that Chad told this anonymous person that he had used antifreeze to poison Frank and that, quote, they'll never be able to track me. Police immediately asked the coroner to look for oleander and antifreeze in Frank's system because now they've got both of those from her. She's telling them what it is. They're seeing it at her house. And they also got a warrant for Angelina's phone records. Shockingly, Frank's toxicology came back with him having something like 15 times the amount of antifreeze necessary to kill someone in his system, which is absolutely fucking crazy. They later found that he had so much ethylene glycol, which is the poison in antifreeze, in his body that it had begun seeping out of his eyes. And, in another shocker, they found no such call from no anonymous person on Angelina's cell phone. Womp, womp. Now, a couple of months later, because again, they're going slow, police again visited Angelina, this time at her brand new Paso Robles home, which I'm sure she wheeled and dealed her way into with the promise of money that she was getting from this, insurance payout, or probably just from the money that she used selling Frank's Montebello home. And there, when they visited her, they told her they had found antifreeze in Frank's system, but that they needed more proof it had been Chad who did this horrible thing. Now, at this point, the police straight up asked Chad for help catching Angelina, and he actually agrees, which I fucking love. I love that he's like, yeah, let's get this bitch. Like, fuck her. She's trying to fuck me over. I have a feeling that he was probably a really cool guy, and he just wanted to get back at her for, like, all the shit that she was doing. And this was the perfect way to do so, because she actually did something so horrible that she deserved to be caught. So Chad agrees to be on a 3-way recorded call with Angelina to try to get more incriminating information from her. Now, the call itself wasn't much, mostly him just asking why she was accusing him and her saying over and over, talk to the investigators, which, like, I fucking hate when people do that. It makes my blood boil. Like, sometimes I'll watch those videos on TikTok where people are arguing and the person just won't stop saying the same thing over and over. And to me, it feels like you're so fucking stupid. And she is. So don't worry, even though this call was very irritating, it did exactly what police hoped that it would do. Immediately after this call, which was recorded, Angelina contacted investigators and told them that Chad had called her and said basically that he did it, but they'd never catch him and that she should, quote, watch her back. And while this obviously isn't proof that she did anything, it doesn't look very good for her. So now, a month or so later, in early 2001, police again reached out to Angelina to tell her that they also found oleander in Frank's blood as well as antifreeze. They said that they needed proof that Chad knew Frank was coming to the academy that day and to show that he had time to plan the murder. So basically they were like, Chad isn't gonna, poison Frank on a whim. He had to know he was coming up. He doesn't work at the camp anymore. So is there any way that we can prove that Chad knew he was coming? Now, Angelina, the wheels start churning, the hamster's running in the wheel in her brain. And she immediately offered up that when she worked there in the office, she would get faxes with the names of both students and employees that were coming in on the buses each day. Now then, wouldn't you know it, just about a day later, investigators get an anonymous fax with a student and faculty list for September 5th, 2000. With the list was a note that said, "Sergeant, I mailed this to you, but maybe you didn't get it. Why is Chad Holloway still free?" Now, hilariously, on top of this just being so fucking obviously coming from Angelina, as if we needed more proof, she went ahead and made sure that we got it. She made sure of that because the fax noted where it had been sent from. And believe it or not, it was not Angel Camp. It was in fact a Staples in Paso Robles, just about a mile from Angelina's new house. This is just so bad. It's like so bad. Like every time they tell Angelina they need something, suddenly a helpful little anonymous birdie flies out of the sky to give it to them. Like I would almost feel bad for her if she wasn't such an awful, evil person, but she is, so fuck her. Now, 2 days later, police finally believe they have enough circumstantial evidence against Angelina to arrest her for Frank's murder, and they do so. And when they do, to really put a cherry on things, they find the fucking Staples receipt for the fax in her purse. Which is just unreal to me. Now from here, police went into evidence mode and began interviewing everybody in Angelina's life. This included Matt Moranis, with whom Angelina was corresponding while in prison. Police obtained a warrant for those letters, and while they were there getting them, Matt told them about the gas leak in the house, which they then corroborated with the gas company records showing someone had in fact been out to fix a leak the exact day that Matt mentioned. They also interviewed her friend Palmyra, who was honest with them about everything. The conversations about oleander and antifreeze, how Angelina talked about killing Frank so much it actually got annoying, and even the milkshake Angelina had made them while they were on the phone in early September. Now, shortly after police contacted Palmyra, Angelina found out about this, and she also reached out to Palmyra to try to convince her to recant her statement. Now, Angelina's first angle with Palmyra was that she could be seen as an accomplice, having known what was going to happen and even knowing about it happening in real time with the milkshake and doing nothing about it. Which, it's not a bad argument, but also it's pretty clear that Palmyra thought that she was full of shit and lived far enough away from the couple that she probably wasn't seeing the day-to-day life of Frank and how he was sick. So it's very likely that she honestly, truly didn't believe anything that Angelina was saying. Now, when Palmyra said, changing my story is going to make me look more guilty, Angelina was like, well, not really. Just tell them that you were mad at me because you found me in bed with your son. And which is such a fucking crazy thing to say. Palmyra agreed with me and declined to do this. And for about the next year, Angelina sat in jail waiting for her court date. But wait. There's more. As always with Angelina, there's going to be more. We're now in May 2002, and Angelina is in a sort of segregated area for prisoners who either need to be kept apart for their own safety or as a punishment for bad behavior, and I'm not really sure why she was there. But she was. And between May 8th and May 9th, so just one day, there was an inmate next to Angelina, and the two got to talking via passing notes, which I guess was very common in this area of the prison. They call it flying kites, which is interesting. Anyway, so this inmate went to the guards on May 10th with some really disturbing notes from Angelina. She showed them the correspondence wherein Angelina asked her to kill Palmyra Gorham. The inmate said that Angelina had admitted to killing her husband by feeding him antifreeze in Gatorade for 4 or 5 days, then offered her $30,000 to kill Palmyra, and even said that if she did this, she'd buy her a house with the insurance money she would get once they got out of prison, because the main witness would be dead. Which also, she's tripping. It's not Palmyra putting her away. It's just one more person who can point to her, but like they had tons of other evidence. On one of the notes was Palmyra's full name, address, and even her phone number. She suggested making the murder look like a robbery and even said to go ahead and rob the house, maybe even bring a U-Haul because she had so much good stuff. Because why not, right? This is just her friend of like fucking 15 years. Now for this, because nothing really happened besides her asking, she was charged only with attempting to dissuade a witness, which is kind of a crazy small charge. But it was in addition to her murder for profit and first-degree murder with special circumstances charges. So $1 million is $1 million here, I suppose. She's already going to go to jail forever. Now, one of the worst things about this case was something that came out during the trial, because she did eventually go to trial. Palmyra was not dead. She did testify. I believe Matt Moronis did as well. And lastly, someone I haven't really talked about very much also testified. And this is kind of the sad part. This person was Angelina's minor daughter, Autumn. Now, Autumn, who I think was about 13 at this time, had seen a lot in her life already. Her younger sister had died. She'd gone through 2 stepdads after being ripped away from her father by Angelina. And now on the stand, she recounted how the night before Frank died, Angelina had instructed her to not drink any of his Gatorade, but to bring it to him along with some soup to help him feel better. The weight of possibly having helped murder her own stepfather, who she really, really liked, must have been awful for her. And I feel terrible for her. And I will say that I found her now, and I'm not going to share what I found, but I hope that she's having a happy and an easy life. She's a very pretty woman, and I just hope that things are good for her. So that really sucks. But basically all of these witnesses, along with Angelina's own actions after Frank's death, were more than enough for her to be convicted of all charges with only circumstantial evidence, which is fucking wild. But also, like, it feels very obvious what happened here. And just the way that she acted afterwards is that's not something that an innocent person does. That's not how an innocent person acts, right? She was convicted quickly, and then she was sentenced to death, believe it or not, in California. And even though we don't really do that here anymore, she, to this day, is on death row. One of only, I believe, 15 women at the time to be on California death row when she was sentenced. I think there's 18 currently. So there's kind of in a holding pattern. Like, it's going to, if anybody else gets, sentenced to that, it's just going to grow the numbers. But the point is, like, there's hundreds of men on death row in California. And at the time she was convicted and sentenced, she was number 15. So that's pretty crazy. To this day, she denies killing Frank and has changed her story more times than I can count, but never admitting what she did. Most of her family has cut her off, but a few still talk to her here and there. And it's weird, like, her sister will be like, she couldn't hurt a fly, she's such a sweet person, but also, like, doesn't talk to her. So I'm not really sure where the family sits with this. Obviously, if you remember at the beginning of the story, like, they're pretty fucked up people, so hard to say how they would react anyway. But, she does interviews, she talks about it, and she basically gets so close to admitting what she did, but she never will, because she said, like, if she admits to it, then she'll lose all hope. And it's like, girl, this is some mental gymnastics. Like, I know that we talked about how she's, like, been diagnosed with multiple personality disorder and, like, other things, but, like, it's really interesting how people cope with the horrible things that they did when, like, everybody knows they did it, but they still can't say so. Anyway, a very, very interesting and sad case. And, like, fuck her. She is so dumb. Like, she is definitely, like, top 5 dumbest criminals. And I appreciate her for that because, she maybe would have never been caught. I think if she had just allowed him to be dead and sold his house and moved on, she would have been fine. But her greed really got the best of her. And I mean, she's used to killing her family members for money. So I think she just thought, hey, one more time, what's it going to hurt? That was her mistake. Anyway, thanks guys for tuning in. Please like, rate, review. I hope you all enjoyed this story. I'll be back with another one shortly. And until then, everybody, stay safe.